Chance on the mathematically impossible scale that the materialist operates by will never give you the order we have in the universe. Welcome back to Campfire Apologetics, where I help equip the everyday Christian with tools to help them defend their faith in an increasingly hostile culture. I'm your host, Mark Hudson, and I think the barber went a little too crazy on my beard, and I'm looking a little funny right now, at least to me, because I don't usually go this low. But anyway, this episode is going to be kind of touching on the transcendental argument for the existence of God, tag or whatever else people call it. It kind of expands on the preconditions of intelligibility. And so, I'll get into that, but I'm sure you all like music. Pretty much everybody does. So, if you're a Christian and you have some good Christian artists that you listen to, leave a comment, because I really am looking for just some new Christian artists. Something that it isn't your typical kind of radio bubblegum worship that you hear on whatever popular Christian radio stations. Just looking for something a little more unique, with originality, not as cheesy and cookie cutter, I guess, is maybe the way to put it. But yeah, it's really hard to find artists. I mean, at one point I was, touring in a Christian metal band. And so I had a lot of Christian metal that I knew about and listened to. But as time goes on, I kind of shift away from that a little bit. I still listen to some heavy music, but mainly at the gym. But yeah, just whatever. If you know any, again, leave a comment so I can check them out, because I'm really looking for something there in the world of Christian music. But as a musician, I tend to think about and look at music in a different way than non-musicians. I tend to hear a lot of different sounds and production tricks and nuances in music that people don't typically pick up on. I remember hearing this kind of little filler sound as a type of production trick in a song. It was like this little kind of percussive thing in the background that was just kind of there to fill in the song. And I remember hearing that, and and I mentioned it to my wife. I'm like, "Do you hear that part?" And she looked at me like I was crazy, because she didn't hear it. And she's just kind of like, "How do you even hear that? How do you notice or recognize those things?" But so this episode, being that I've been a musician my whole life, it's just something that I've thought about a lot more recently. So, like, I've been thinking about the laws of induction, uniformity of nature, and how those things pertain to music, but even more so, how music proves the existence of God. Music can't make sense if God doesn't exist. Now, when I say prove, I want to just touch on something that I had another video. I think it was like the ultimate proof of God or something along those lines. And, somebody commented and they said something to the effect of, well, I'm still not persuaded, or whatever. It was something along those lines. I guess, whatever I said was not compelling enough for them, which is fine. But there's a difference between proof and persuasion. We could talk about proof and evidence and things like that all day long. Now, whether or not you would be persuaded or not is another thing altogether. Some people have a commitment to their presuppositions and their traditions that won't allow them to be persuaded, or at least maybe not in the moment. But we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna get into it. And so when I say proof, don't think I'm saying that everybody's going to be persuaded and that you're gonna watch this video or send it to a friend or whatever the case may be, and they're gonna watch or listen to it and be like, "Wow, I believe in God now," right? Because that's not really how things work typically. So anyway, so how does music prove the existence of God? So first, I want to refer to an episode that I did about the preconditions of intelligibility. It's something I mentioned when I first started here, because it might give a little more of a foundation and framework to help understand this concept. So, although I don't think it's too crazy or deep, I think most people will be just fine with this. But still, go watch or listen to that episode, mainly because I want you to watch and listen to all of the episodes. So, the argument for the existence of God using music is what is known again as a transcendental argument. So these are some of my favorite arguments personally. They're always extremely interesting, and I think they're powerful. So the central claim of this argument is that there is a consistent relationship between musical frequencies and the sounds they produce. So these frequencies and sounds are governed by the laws of induction and physics. And this necessitates the existence of God as the ultimate standard and foundation for the order, reliability, and intelligibility of these laws. And so, what is induction? And I get into this in that earlier episode that I mentioned, but just to touch on it, induction is the reasoning process in which you make general conclusions based on specific observations. So, this is how we know that the future will be like the past in similar circumstances and conditions. This this works in junction anyway with uniformity of nature, which is the philosophical idea that natural laws are consistent across space and time, and that you will yield similar or the same results in something like a scientific experiment or a mathematical equation, again, given similar circumstances. And so music is consistent because it is ordered and governed by laws. All of the laws of physics, induction, and uniformity are consistent, which is what makes music possible, or anything possible for that matter. But a naturalistic worldview can't account for such order or possibility. Random chance and unguided processes over space and time could never give you order or consistency. Chance on the mathematically impossible scale that the materialist operates by will never give you the order we have in the universe. From the most complex to the simplest things in the universe, it is all ordered with a precision that could never come about by chance. The expectation that natural laws, such as the physics of sound, will remain consistent over time is based on uniformity of nature. We expect this because we take it for granted. We don't ever wonder why these things are the way they are. We just assume that they will be the way that they have always been, but that only makes sense if there is a God who has ordered the universe in a specific way to operate in this way or by these laws. Genesis 8:22 states, "While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Otherwise, you are reasoning in a circle to say that the future will be like the past because the future has always been like the past." God has specifically ordered the universe to operate in a specific way, and he is the one that holds it all together and sustains everything. So the Christian has a revelational epistemology, which means that we can have knowledge and have certainty because we have a God who has given us a revelation, and we understand that any and all knowledge must come from the mind of God. So when I say epistemology, that is the study of knowledge. How do you know what you know? That's um, in a nutshell. When you hear epistemology, that's what it's referring to. So if you don't start with God, you can't begin to truly know anything or have certainty about anything. Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." Psalm 36:9 says, "For with you is the fountain of life. In your light do we see light." Musical notes correspond to exact frequencies. For instance, the note A4 is 440 hertz. The note E2 is 82.407 hertz. Every note has a corresponding frequency, and every single time you play that frequency on any instrument, you will get whatever note corresponds to whatever frequency you play. If nothing is ordered or sustained, then we should have no reason to expect that a certain frequency will produce the exact same note every time. In a random universe, we might expect that 440 hertz might be a D2 in the future instead of an A4, but this is not the case. It is always and will always be an A4. I believe God has ordered everything so that we get a consistent note corresponding to a specific frequency every single time. And this is what allows us to enjoy music. It's what gives music the possibility to be meaningful, beautiful, and universal. Universal meaning that 440 hertz or that frequency will be the note A4 in America and also A4 anywhere else in the world. If music isn't predictable, it could not exist. Nothing can be predictable unless a God has ordered the universe so that it is predictable. The laws of induction cannot be justified by naturalism. This isn't some kind of Christian argument or idea either. So I don't want you guys to think that it's some kind of arbitrary claim that Christians came up with. This actually isn't a Christian argument. The laws of induction, it's an argument thought of by popular philosopher David Hume, who stated that belief in God is nonsensical. He said there can be no demonstrative arguments to prove that those instances of which we have had no experience resemble those of which we have had experience. He understood the problem of induction, and that is, as I've already stated, that naturalism does not have a foundation to assume the future will be like the past, and that the assumption that the future will be like the past has no rational grounding in a purely material universe. And he understood this principle because he understood that naturalistic explanations are circular, and they all really fall short. Explaining the uniformity of nature by pointing to past consistency is circular. Science can explain how frequencies work, but it can never explain why the laws governing them remain consistent. If natural laws like the ones I have discussed are not grounded in a necessary eternal being, then they could unpredictably change, making music and science impossible. The Christian has a grounding or foundation for these laws. God grounds uniformity of nature, a rational person, intelligent, or personal, intelligent, spaceless, timeless, immaterial, sovereign, and perfect God provides the necessary foundations for the consistency of the natural laws that govern our universe, including the laws that govern sound and music and everything else. But this episode is more specifically about music. God is unchanging, and this explains why natural laws remain stable and intelligible. Unstable, random, and impersonal forces cannot explain why the universe is structured and ordered in a specific way that allows us to write and listen to music. Not only that, but music would have no meaning along with everything else in the universe. You could create your own meaning, like an existentialist, but there can't be any ultimate meaning, and that starts to dance the line of pragmatism, which is a different kind of scary that we don't have time to get into. Now, some might say, anyway, that natural laws just simply exist. Reality is axiomatic, or that these laws are a brute fact of the universe. But this is kind of a cop out to me, and I think it falls apart. I might ask the non-believer or atheist what justifies your assumption that reality is objectively true and consistent. Atheism or materialism or naturalism, whatever however you want to define it, lacks an ultimate foundation for why reality must be consistent, knowable, and non-illusory. So without an ultimate foundation, the unbeliever is left with really no justification to ground these laws and is being arbitrary. If you are challenged and hear something like these laws just exist and they are self-evident, you can ask them, why should these laws or reality be self-evident in a godless, chaotic universe? You assume order without explaining it. Natural laws are contingent. Laws require lawgivers. Impersonal, immaterial forces don't somehow grant us laws that remain consistent over space and time. Now, another objection might be that the universe or the universe's order can be explained by chance or necessity. But necessity to who? An impersonal universe has needs. It necessitates something. How would that ever come to be? How can chance explain order to the finest detail of the universe? This type of argument comes with its own presuppositions because everybody has them, again, as I've stated before. Again, there is no ultimate reason or foundation that the universe should be orderly as it is, and why human minds should be capable of understanding it and being able to organize frequencies into intelligible rhythms, melodies, harmonies, to make music or songs, or to be meaningful or anything. To believe this mathematically is more of a miracle than God speaking the universe into existence. Chance can't produce consistent mathematical order, and necessity offers no reason why these particular laws exist. A purposeful creator explains both the existence and nature of these laws. Many atheists and non-believers like to accuse Christians of the God of the gaps argument, but then espouse the exact same thing from their point of view. They'll say science will eventually explain why natural laws are consistent. The problem is that science presupposes order. It needs order to operate and therefore could never discover order. Science can explain how laws operate, but it can't explain why these laws are orderly, intelligible, and unchanging. This is a philosophical question and not a scientific one. A God of the gaps argument would say something like, we don't currently understand X, therefore God must be the explanation for X. For example, we don't understand lightning, so it must be caused by God. That's an example of a God of the gaps argument. What many presuppositionalists like Van Til and Greg Bahnsen have argued is that the very possibility of knowledge, logic, and science presupposes the existence of the Christian God. It's not an argument from ignorance, it's an argument from the impossibility of the contrary. Without God, the concept of rationality, logic, knowledge, and science, or really anything else, falls apart. An example of this might be something like this: for logical laws to be universal, invariant, and immaterial, they must be grounded in an absolute mind, namely God. Transcendental arguments are not about scientific unknowns, but about the necessary foundations of intelligibility itself. Laws of logic, uniformity of nature, objective morality, etc., are not gaps in knowledge. They are necessary preconditions for knowledge itself. A transcendental argument is not an empirical argument. God of the gaps would rely on empirical gaps or unknowns in science. The transcendental argument asks what must be true in order for science, logic, morals to be meaningful in the first place. It's not claiming something like, we don't know how rationality works, so God must have done it. It says rationality itself is only possible if God exists. Music at a foundational level can't exist or be meaningful unless a personal, rational, intelligent, spaceless, timeless, immaterial God has ordered things in such a way that we can order frequencies in a beautiful or even ugly way to be meaningful and intelligible. So even bands like, if you're a metalhead and you're familiar with some of these, Behemoth or Mayhem, an old black metal band, or even some more recent bands like Ghost, or what's the one that's pretty bad, Sleep Token, bands like that, and many others, and musicians alike, who use their platform and the things God has given them to spit in his face and deny him. They can't help but show the image of God in them when they create music as their creator has created all things. Like, I'm more familiar with the metal side of music, but there are plenty of satanic and anti-God artists who are inadvertently displaying that they are made in the image of God when they use his laws in creation to blaspheme his name. Just as an atheist can be moral, but can explain why they are or give a justification for morality, so too they can write music and also not be able to tell you why they can, or give a justification for how the physics of sound is consistent so that they can be artists. So this argument can be made for a lot of different things, really. The transcendental argument, I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people like it, is that it can be used in so many different contexts. But I've been a musician my whole life, so music sticks out to me more, and pretty much everybody enjoys music to some degree. So at some level, I think most people can, connect with that. So anyway, I hope this episode was not really confusing in any way. I'm hoping it was interesting and edifying and encouraging. But anyway, brothers and sisters, remember to give a reason for the hope that is in you, and do it lovingly with gentleness and reverence. All right, thanks. See you next time.